Rafael Nadal suddenly broke his silence and firmly refused to hold back when whispers began to spread from the camp of Roger Federer. The rumor was that Alex Eala was threatening the carefully constructed legacy of the chosen successor to Federer by completely overshadowing his very own protégé. The way the King of Clay stepped into the fray caught absolutely everyone off guard. Yet Nadal simply did what he has always done best by stepping up when it mattered the absolute most. He made his commanding presence undeniably felt. This is the hidden story the tennis establishment prefers to keep completely under wraps. Long before the young athletes truly understood the weight of their own paths, a fierce new rivalry was already brewing. Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer spectacularly split the entire tennis world down the middle for well over 20 incredible years. The glorious sport itself was fundamentally transformed by the relentless collision of two contrasting philosophies, two brilliant personalities, and two defining eras sharing the exact same court. Roger Federer stood as the absolute epitome of flawless execution, embodying beauty, unparalleled grace, and pure poetic motion on the court. Meanwhile, the fierce Spanish gladiator from Mallorca offered something entirely different. Rafael Nadal managed to magically transform grueling physical hardship into high art, making every single stroke look like an explosion of raw power. These legendary titans clashed exactly 40 epic times. The Spaniard ultimately led their historic head-to-head battles 24-16. However, cold statistics could never truly capture the profound depth of the dynamic between these two extraordinary men. They share a complex bond that goes far deeper than mere fierce competition. Only the absolute greatest champions can truly understand the profound mutual respect that existed so deeply between them. The entire global tennis community anxiously braced itself for the inevitable question that always haunts the departure of defining sporting icons. This massive question loomed heavily when the Swiss maestro walked away in 2022, followed by the Spanish bull in 2024. Everyone desperately asked who would be the next great champion to take the throne. Federer discovered his perfect answer in Joao Fonseca, the explosive 18-year-old Brazilian sensation who proudly wore gear from the sportswear company the Swiss legend personally co-owned. The Swiss master did far more than simply throw sponsorship money at the young prospect. He genuinely believed in his profound potential, heavily promoted him, and actively made him the shining face of a vibrant future. Federer was quietly orchestrating this grand vision from the quiet sidelines. The Brazilian kid had captured millions of hearts with his undeniable raw talent, boldly claiming the United States Open Junior Championship in 2023. He then sent massive shockwaves through the Australian Open in 2025, sensationally reaching the second round after stunningly defeating the formidable Andrei Rublev. The response from Nadal took a completely different developmental approach, as he had been quietly nurturing his own remarkable prodigy over a significantly longer period of focused time. Ever since she was just 13 years old, Alex Eala had been intensely training and receiving world-class instruction directly at the prestigious Rafael Nadal Academy. When she first arrived on the sunny island of Mallorca as a hopeful youngster, the dynamic left-handed Filipina player hailing proudly from Quezon City possessed an almost inexplicable burning passion that perfectly matched her undeniable natural aptitude. Nadal personally oversaw her steady development every single step of the way, warmly congratulating her on her rising accomplishments in the loving manner that only a truly dedicated mentor ever could. He carefully monitored her rapid, steady ascent up the difficult global rankings. Here were two chosen prodigies, heavily backed by two absolute living legends. The entire sporting civilization was about to dramatically discover that these seemingly parallel fairy tales simply could not remain separated indefinitely. However, absolutely no one in the establishment was truly prepared for the explosive reality of what happened next. A massive problem arises when one of the chosen prodigies grows so incredibly quickly that it makes the other highly touted prospect begin to look like a mere fading afterthought. That is precisely the wild dynamic that started to unfold during the unforgettable 2025 professional season. Things swiftly became incredibly complex when the silent mounting tension finally found a public voice. You must first fully comprehend exactly how astonishing Alexandra Ayala and her meteoric ascent truly was to understand exactly why this bitter dispute erupted the dramatic way it finally did. This was absolutely not a slow and steady climb up the traditional rankings, but rather a breathtaking and spectacular explosion of pure, unprecedented talent. During that very same magical season, she proudly became the absolute first Filipina player to decisively win a Women's Tennis Association singles championship. She triumphantly crashed into the top 100 global rankings and miraculously powered her way straight into a major tournament semifinal. She confidently achieved an incredible career-high rating of number 50 in the world by the close of 2025. However, these dry statistical figures do not even remotely reflect the magic of what actually took place on the courts. Cold numbers simply cannot illustrate the deafening and passionate roaring crowds that followed her every single move. Eala fearlessly defeated established titans to miraculously reach the semifinals of the prestigious Miami Open in March 2025. She boldly stormed into Miami and stunningly dismantled highly favored veterans like Madison Keys and Iga Swiatek before ultimately falling to Jessica Pegula. She even dramatically defeated the reigning Australian Open champion to prove she truly belonged among the absolute best. She completely conquered the previous world champion while still playing merely as a qualifier. She accomplished this unbelievable feat and sent the entire Filipino community into a vibrant frenzy. The roaring crowds in Florida, along with millions watching intently from computer screens and phones across a 7,000-island archipelago, went completely insane. The United States Open quickly followed up this incredible magic. Pure, unadulterated drama completely characterized her crucial third set. Despite falling behind early by 1-5, Alexandra fiercely persisted and absolutely refused to back down, launching a remarkably valiant recovery. She clawed her way bravely to 4-5 before intense controversy suddenly erupted. A massive debate started because it remained fiercely unclear whether her swinging racket had actually crossed the net tape. She deftly flicked a crucial ball directly toward the net. The presiding chair umpire carefully went over the instant video replay and ultimately decided the incredibly tight call, firmly in the favor of Alexandra. Her fiercely competitive opponent absolutely exploded with visible rage, while the electric audience also completely lost their minds. Amidst all this wild confusion, a 20-year-old Filipino girl secured her very first major Grand Slam main draw victory. She immediately collapsed right onto the hard court in absolute shock, forcing the entire sporting world to finally stop and pay attention. Regarding the electrifying atmosphere surrounding her thrilling matches, the sentiment was entirely unanimous. A highly experienced tennis referee stationed in Dubai, who had personally witnessed all the legendary greats gracefully command that very same court, admitted this was a profoundly unique and different experience altogether. This was unlike anything the historic sport had ever seen before. In fact, advanced ticket sales for the 2026 Dubai Tennis Championships skyrocketed an astonishing 48% year over year. This massive surge in popular attendance was driven almost entirely by the magnetic presence of Alexandra Eala. During a highly publicized interview with a prominent tennis podcast, a former professional player was directly asked a heavy question. He was boldly asked whether Alexandra was rapidly becoming the absolute main attraction across all of professional women tennis. He responded affirmatively right away. Meanwhile, where exactly was the young Joao Fonseca during all of this overwhelming noise? He was diligently working, endlessly grinding, and quietly carrying out all the proper necessary actions behind the scenes. However, the massive global spotlight remained unnaturally bright and completely blinding. That deafening and loud spotlight enthusiastically followed the Filipino star absolutely everywhere she traveled. This glaring disparity in massive popular attention was steadily starting to provoke heated discussions that really ought to have remained deeply confidential. These quiet whispers echoed fiercely within the private hallways of the professional tennis world. Now listen extremely carefully, because this exact moment is precisely when our entire narrative takes a very dramatic and unexpected turn. The revered Swiss legend gracefully sat down for a rather lengthy and in-depth interview in late 2025. This candid conversation occurred during a lavish promotional event squarely focused on his highly anticipated upcoming milestones. The prestigious event celebrated his impending legendary entrance into the International Sporting Hall of Fame scheduled for 2026. Everything remained incredibly friendly and warmly sentimental, right up until a specific journalist abruptly brought up the exciting next generation of stars. The lively discourse was filled with wonderful memories and polite praise as the legendary maestro warmly grinned when his young Brazilian protégé was proudly mentioned. However, the entire atmosphere shifted drastically when the name of Alexandra Eala entered the crowded room. The moment her name was floated into the conversation, the mood permanently changed. His subsequent remark was absolutely not shouted out in anger, nor was it a bitter tirade, but it somehow hurt significantly more. It cut incredibly deep precisely because it was elegantly delivered with a certain devastating level of cold and calculated precision. He smoothly made a highly cautious, seemingly tactful, yet crystal clear public suggestion. He implied that several other incredibly hard-working budding talents had frustratingly found it increasingly difficult to rightfully get the proper professional credit they so deeply deserved. He directly blamed this on the intensely massive media focus on one specific player. He stated the obsessive media focus surrounding Alexandra created a massive unfair imbalance in global sports coverage. He boldly noted that equally worthy and talented young players were now being completely passed over and unfairly ignored. He argued brilliant prospects like Fonseca were being severely overshadowed simply because one specific player had successfully grasped what he controversially described as a fierce phenomenon of pure nationalism. He heavily implied her exploding fame stemmed directly from regional pride rather than actual elite tennis skill. Naturally, the wild internet did not patiently wait for any nuanced background information, because the unforgiving internet absolutely never does. That highly inflammatory phrase, contrasting nationalism against pure tennis merit, was instantly clipped, widely shared, and fiercely quoted. It was passionately responded to an estimated 10 million times across various global platforms in a mere matter of hours. The incredibly loyal Filipino tennis fans, who were already widely considered the absolute most fiercely devoted and highly organized digital group on the entire planet, furiously rallied right away to defend their rising star. Massive digital comment sections instantly turned into highly toxic and explosive virtual battlefields. A legendary global name that was once universally spoken with almost absolute holy respect was suddenly trending everywhere for pure outrage. The pristine name of the Swiss maestro was suddenly incredibly popular online for all the absolute wrong reasons. Amidst the swirling digital chaos, it was the exact same burning question that fiercely kept coming up absolutely everywhere. Everyone desperately wanted to know if a single prominent figure from the established tennis community would bravely speak up. Would anyone powerfully stand up to defend her honor? For the very first time since his emotional professional retirement, a king finally stirred. The legendary Rafael Nadal proudly picked up his trusty racket on November 19, 2025. This momentous occasion occurred precisely 1 full year after he played his final grueling professional match at the historic International Team Cup Finals. Alexandra Eala, the incredibly talented current world number 50 in the women professional circuit, was specifically chosen as his very first official practice partner when he finally made his grand and triumphant return to the clay court. He deliberately chose to make this highly symbolic return at the prestigious Rafa Nadal Academy. And this specific pairing was absolutely not a mere coincidence. The meticulous Spanish champion is simply not a man who ever makes careless mistakes, especially when it comes to his fiercely protected public image and legacy. He posted a glowing social media photo of their intense training session, happily captioning that it felt truly magnificent to be back on a competitive tennis court exactly 1 full year later. He warmly added that practicing alongside the brilliant Alexandra Eala was a fantastic experience, playfully promising that he would be much more resilient the very next time they played. The young rising star gracefully responded to her legendary mentor by boldly declaring that he was back on the court looking like he had absolutely never even left the sport. These were seemingly simple and polite exchanged words, but they instantly made a massive global impression given the intense firestorm currently surrounding her name at that exact moment. That is because on that fateful sunny afternoon, the legendary Spaniard and his dedicated young pupil did far more than simply smack yellow tennis balls back and forth across the net. In a highly cautious sporting society where incredibly powerful men usually tended to remain safely neutral simply to preserve their own pristine legacies, he courageously chose a very different path. The fiercely loyal king of clay stood openly, clearly, and beautifully alongside her, sending an unmistakable message that he had firmly picked a side in this bitter and highly public dispute. The determined 20-year-old Filipina girl standing proudly by his side had diligently trained at his elite school ever since she was just a little kid with a massive dream. She had triumphantly brought absolutely all of the invaluable lessons he had personally taught her regarding pure fighting spirit to massive global courts all around the world. Shortly after this viral practice session, he was explicitly questioned about the highly controversial remarks regarding young players and perceived media imbalance made by his legendary Swiss rival. During this highly anticipated follow-up interview, the brilliant Spaniard utilized the exact same deliberate and incredibly precise word choices that he routinely uses while carefully selecting his devastating ground strokes. According to his fiercely convicted perspective, absolutely any brave athlete who successfully attracts a massive wave of passionate new fans should be highly honored rather than viewed with cynical suspicion. He passionately argued that the fierce fervor of incredibly devoted and loud supporters absolutely does not detract from the prestigious sport of tennis whatsoever. Instead, he boldly proclaimed that this explosive and vibrant fan energy is the absolute vital lifeline required for the historic game to beautifully survive and financially thrive. He proudly claimed that he had spent countless years closely observing the relentless hard work and pure dedication of Alexandra right up close and personal on his own courts. He firmly declared that the massive magnitude of a passionate fan base should absolutely never be cruelly mistaken for a fundamental lack of actual athletic value or pure talent. The legendary champion politely recognized his long-standing bond with the Swiss maestro, gracefully noting that his personal friendship with his historic rival remained incredibly excellent and intact. He deliberately kept the peaceful door completely open for their famous friendship by warmly recalling how they still frequently spoke to each other on a highly amicable daily basis. However, his public message was stunningly clear regarding this incredibly specific and highly sensitive issue, effectively drawing a fierce protective line straight into the red clay. This unfair public critique was absolutely not something the fiercely protective Spaniard was ever going to quietly overlook or simply sweep under the proverbial rug. He fiercely refused to stay silent when it directly concerned a young person he had openly supported, deeply believed in, and personally mentored since long before anybody even knew her name. When a legendary guy who has famously never sought out petty controversy for its own sake openly plants his battle flag, you absolutely know something remarkably genuine is heavily at risk. Thus, the entire global tennis world instantly felt the massive, undeniable weight of that powerful statement echoing loudly through the prestigious international locker rooms. However, this exact moment is precisely the crucial point at which we must collectively pause and bravely pose an incredibly difficult and deeply nuanced overarching question. Was the elegant Swiss maestro actually completely mistaken in his highly controversial and heavily debated public assessment of the current shifting tennis landscape? The brilliant Brazilian prodigy is undeniably unique, boasting supreme technical talent, explosive athletic ability, and an incredibly rare cognitive maturity for someone his very young age. These exceptional and beautifully refined traits effortlessly make him a genuinely real, potential global superstar who absolutely deserves massive praise and a very bright spotlight. Furthermore, it is also undeniably true that the massive cultural phenomenon surrounding the young Filipina star has frequently led to a blinding degree of heavy and overwhelming media attention. This intense, glaring spotlight sometimes, unfortunately, eclipses objective performance indicators on the court. Following her magical run in Miami, a frustrating series of early tournament departures shockingly prompted vicious hate speech. This toxic venom poured in heavily from both newly minted fans and casual supporters alike. The daily conversation constantly surrounding Alexandra often veers wildly between completely unwarranted absolute adoration and grossly exaggerated harsh criticism. Neither of these massive extremes is actually beneficial to the developing young athlete or the pristine integrity of the sport itself. She simply did not mince her own words when she gracefully took a tough loss. She lost decisively to Coco Gauff in Dubai by a tough score of 6-0 and 6-2. To be completely honest, she bravely acknowledged that she genuinely still lagged quite a bit behind the absolute best women playing professional tennis. It is incredibly uncommon and deeply exceptional for someone so remarkably young to openly exhibit that profound kind of brutal honesty. She absolutely does not need any artificial defense against cold, hard reality. She has repeatedly shown the entire globe that she can fearlessly deal with tough setbacks completely head-on. However, there is an incredibly important and vital distinction between facing cruel rejection and receiving actual constructive critique. There is a massive structural difference between accurately seeing the holes in a developing game and completely deleting her magnificent and hard-earned accomplishments. Alexandra herself brilliantly responded to this massive, overwhelming situation with her usual remarkable mental lucidity. She humbly stated that she constantly tries to sincerely express her deepest daily gratitude. She movingly explained that from her personal background, she has sadly witnessed extreme systemic poverty and has vividly seen severe, crushing human hardship completely up close. Even if she has not necessarily experienced such devastating hardship personally, she emphasized that she can still be profoundly grateful for everything she currently has, and we must carefully think about what she has really accomplished on the grandest stages. When absolutely all the chaotic outside noise is completely stripped away, you must remember that she started 2025 sitting far back at number 138 in the world. Please take a quick minute to completely remove yourself from the exhausting internet drama. Take a much-needed mental break from the bitter social media fights, the sensationalized screaming headlines, and the highly controversial quotations that have been unfairly snipped out of context. The true significance of this inspiring narrative lies in something so much greater. It represents something significantly larger than a mere petty dispute between two retiring legendary titans. The historic and beautiful sport of professional tennis is rapidly and fundamentally evolving right before our very eyes. The game was once tightly controlled by a highly exclusive and limited group of powerful American and European celebrities. It was historically watched by a relatively tiny and extremely wealthy worldwide audience. However, the magnificent sport is now rapidly becoming infinitely more accessible to completely different global demographics. Fresh, exciting faces, wildly passionate new admirers, and massively booming untapped international markets are actively taking over. Additionally, these incredibly passionate new admirers are absolutely not sitting down quietly and being completely passive. They are highly organized, proudly vocal, deeply sentimental, and passionately involved in every single swinging volley. The electrifying matches featuring Alexandra miraculously created a distinctly different stadium mood than anything the establishment had ever witnessed before. This was directly according to a highly seasoned tennis referee stationed in Dubai. This veteran official, who had spent countless decades closely watching the absolute best players in the world, noted the loud crowds were not necessarily louder, but wonderfully distinct in their urgent pressing nature. He beautifully described the roaring stadium energy as being far more pressing, profoundly urgent, and incredibly vibrant. The young superstar got it absolutely just right when analyzing her own massive cultural impact. She smartly recognized that some enormous global markets possess incredibly massive and totally unrealized sporting potential. All these eager fans desperately need is for relatable players to bravely show up and confidently establish themselves. Alexandra has flawlessly done exactly just that with her magical rising career. Just to truly feel what the electric atmosphere is actually like down on the hard court, you absolutely should watch her incredible live matches. This precise shifting dynamic is the exact mounting tension that now firmly exists right at the burning core of professional tennis. The massive legacy institutions and the meticulously crafted old hierarchies deciding exactly who receives precious funding are fiercely colliding. They are suddenly running headfirst against an unstoppable cultural force they were not truly prepared to ever handle. And that magnificent new power proudly has a name. Boasting a lethal backhand that has dramatically defeated 3 Grand Slam winners in a single miraculous tournament run, she now boldly holds a world ranking of number 31, proving that her massive fame is backed by undeniable pure talent. The steadfast public support from Rafael Nadal completely goes beyond a simple and amicable polite exchange between an older teacher and his young pupil. It firmly makes a profound and permanent statement about the exact sort of beautifully inclusive sport that tennis truly aspires to be moving forward into a bold new era. It is a bold public claim, suggesting that the traditional gatekeepers of the game are suddenly unable to control the shifting narrative simply because the newest global celebrity is far too adored or the passionate new stadium crowd is far too boisterous. You absolutely cannot beg everyone to lovingly observe your sport and then get visibly upset when the whole diverse world actually arrives at your doorstep to wildly cheer. After securing a tough victory against Alexandra in Dubai, Coco Gauff graciously took the public microphone and sincerely stated that she would like to loudly thank Alexandra for bringing such an incredible new demographic to the sport. The young American champion beautifully remarked, right on the vibrant court, that she was deeply and truly grateful for the massive, fresh energy. She excitedly declared that the passionate cultural impact was absolutely fantastic in her honest opinion. Gauff gracefully acknowledged the massive underlying gift that Alexandra was generously providing the historic game, even shortly after fiercely defeating her in a tough competitive match. The Filipina sensation was further described as the absolute ideal role model by the formidable Jessica Pegula. Pegula openly marveled at the spectacular way the young prodigy has been able to completely fill massive stadiums and deeply praised how her proud native country passionately supports her every move. Pegula warmly noted that witnessing such pure national devotion is something truly special. She brilliantly added that the young star manages the crushing pressure and chaotic things with such spectacular poise and unbelievable emotional maturity. For the very first time in an entire grueling calendar year, Rafael Nadal triumphantly returned to a professional clay tennis court, proudly picked up a racket, and lovingly devoted his legendary public support directly to Alexandra. The legendary Spanish gladiator famously said he never ever considered his historic past records, but rather always focused entirely on the next point, dedicating his grand return not to Joao Fonseca, but to the 20-year-old Filipina who brought his academy name to the globe. This grand narrative leaves us standing at a crucial sporting turning point, asking if this brilliant 20-year-old is now the absolute most significant tennis player in the world, and whether Federer went too far, or if Nadal was entirely justified in fiercely defending her.